It was just past midnight when I started driving home from a delivery run that took longer than I'd planned. The highway stretched empty ahead of me, straight for miles, cutting through farmland and long stretches of nothing. I was tired but too wired to stop. I had a thermos of coffee beside me, the smell of diesel faint in the air, and the hum of the road beneath the tires was the only sound besides the low vibration of the engine. The sky was completely black. No stars, no moon, just my headlights showing me what was directly in front of me and nothing else. There's a strange feeling that comes when you've been driving for hours in the dark. You start to lose track of how long you've been on the road. The white lines start to blur into one another. You can feel your body moving, but your mind drifts somewhere else. That's how I felt that night, half awake, half running on instinct. The first thing that stood out to me was how deserted the highway was. I hadn't seen another car in almost an hour. No trucks, no headlights behind me, no taillights ahead. Just the endless black ribbon of asphalt and the steady flash of reflective road markers flying by. The air was dry and cold, the kind of cold that seeps through the door seals no matter how tight they are. I had my jacket zipped up and the heater going, but I could still feel the chill on my legs. The highway curved slightly and rose into a small overpass. From up there, I could see nothing but flat land and a few dim orange lights far in the distance. Probably some farm buildings. Everything felt still, too still. That's when I noticed something strange on the shoulder up ahead. At first, I thought it was just debris, a tire, maybe an old bag. But as I got closer, I saw it wasn't. It was a car, pulled off onto the side, half on the gravel, half on the asphalt. The hazard lights weren't on, but one of the brake lights glowed faintly, like it was dying. The car was angled awkwardly, like it had come to a sudden stop. I slowed down as I passed. The car was an older model sedan, silver or gray, hard to tell in the weak light. The driver's door was slightly open. There was no movement inside. I couldn't see a person, couldn't see any damage to the car. Just that open door and the faint red glow from the back. I kept driving. I didn't stop. Something in my gut told me not to. I told myself someone had gone to get help or maybe was sleeping in the car. But as I checked my rearview mirror, I saw that faint red brake light flicker once, then go out completely. After that, there was only darkness behind me again. For the next few miles, the silence got heavier. The hum of the road didn't comfort me anymore. It felt like the air inside the car had thickened somehow. I took a long sip of coffee and tried to focus on the white lines again, but every few minutes, I found myself glancing in the mirrors. I didn't know what I was looking for, just something. A few minutes later, I saw lights behind me, headlights, far back, but moving fast. I felt a small wave of relief at first, someone else on the road. But as they got closer, I noticed they weren't steady. The beams wobbled, dipped, then rose sharply again, like the car was speeding up, slowing down, then jerking forward. It was strange enough that I moved into the right lane to give them space. But they didn't pass me. They stayed behind me, a good 50 yards back, the headlights glaring into my mirrors. Every time I looked, the brightness made it hard to see anything else. I kept waiting for them to move around me, but they just followed, mile after mile. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was some tired driver doing the same thing I was, trying to stay awake. But after a while, the lights got closer, creeping up until they filled my mirrors completely. I could feel my pulse beating in my neck. The road stretched endlessly forward. No exits, no gas stations, no signs of life. I pressed the gas a little harder, pushing up to 75. The lights stayed right behind me. I sped up more, 80, then 85. Still there. Always the same distance, always perfectly centered in my mirror. My throat was dry. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. I could feel the weight of that car behind me like it was pressing on my back. After maybe 15 minutes of that, the lights suddenly vanished. Just gone. 1 second they were there, flooding the mirrors, and the next it was pure darkness again. I slowed down slightly, unsure if my eyes were playing tricks on me. I looked behind me again. Nothing. The road was empty. No glow on the horizon. No distant lights. Just black. That's when I started noticing something else. the road itself. The lane markings looked faded, uneven. The reflective paint that usually caught my headlights was missing in some stretches. The asphalt had patches, cracks, uneven edges. I didn't remember this section being like that earlier. I hadn't turned off anywhere, but the road felt older somehow. Then I saw something ahead, a shape on the shoulder again, near the guardrail. I eased off the gas. The beams of my headlights stretched forward, revealing another car. The same shape, same dull silver color. It looked identical to the one I'd passed earlier. It was in the same position too, angled halfway onto the gravel, driver's door open. Only this time, the back end was smashed in. The trunk was bent upward, metal twisted. I could see the faint gleam of shattered glass on the road as I rolled past. The urge to stop hit me hard, but I couldn't bring myself to. I just kept driving, gripping the wheel until my knuckles hurt. My chest felt tight, and every sound in the car seemed too loud. After another mile, I finally saw an exit sign. The letters were faded, but I didn't care where it led. I turned off the highway and followed the narrow ramp down to a smaller road. The sudden darkness hit even harder. No streetlights, no houses, nothing. Just fields on both sides and the distant hum of the highway fading behind me. I drove until I saw a dim orange light up ahead. A rest area. It was small, just 2 parking spots, a vending machine, and a single flickering light over a bench. I pulled in and shut off the engine. The silence hit immediately, thick and heavy. I sat there for a long time. My heart was still racing. My mind kept replaying the image of that second car, the crushed rear, the open door. I told myself to get out, stretch, maybe splash water on my face, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't move. When I finally looked up into the rearview mirror, I froze. Far down the road I'd come from, a pair of headlights appeared again, small at first, then growing, slowly but steadily. They weren't moving fast this time, just a steady, crawling pace, the lights dipping slightly as the car rolled over uneven ground. I sat there, not breathing, watching them get closer and closer. I started the engine again and backed out of the rest area, turning my lights off as I did. I didn't want to draw attention. I merged back onto the road, heading in the opposite direction, my hands shaking the whole time. When I looked in the mirror again, the headlights had reached the rest area. They stopped right where I had been parked. For a moment, they just sat there, idling, 2 bright circles burning into the dark. Then they turned off. No movement after that. No sound. Just darkness again. I drove until I saw another ramp leading back to the highway and took it, heading the opposite direction. I stayed on that route until the faint glow of city lights appeared on the horizon. I didn't stop until I reached the first gas station I saw. When I stepped out, my legs were stiff, trembling. The air felt warm compared to the freezing chill inside the car. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. I looked back down the highway, but it was empty. I don't know who was driving that car. I don't know if it was even the same one or if I was seeing things after hours on the road. But I know what I felt. The way it followed, the way it disappeared, the way it waited, it was too deliberate, too quiet. I finished my drive home as the sun was coming up. The world looked normal again. Cars, people, noise, color. But the highway hasn't felt the same since. I avoid that stretch now. Every time I see an abandoned car on the shoulder, every time headlights appear in the distance behind me, I feel that same cold rising up in my chest. Because it's not the darkness that scares me anymore. It's knowing that sometimes, what's out there on those empty roads isn't waiting for help. It's waiting for someone to stop. It was around 3 a.m. when I started the drive back home. I had just finished a double shift and was running mostly on caffeine and habit. The highway was empty, the kind of empty that feels wrong, like the world has shut down and you're the only one left moving through it. The air was still, the sky heavy and dark with low clouds, no moon, no stars. My headlights stretched ahead in a long, narrow beam, bouncing off the reflectors in the road and the faded white lines that guided me forward. I liked driving at night most of the time. No traffic, no noise, no distractions. But that night, it didn't feel peaceful. The silence had weight to it. My radio was off, the heater made a low hum, and the tires whispered over the asphalt in that steady rhythm that usually calms me down. But instead, every mile I drove made me feel more alert, like something was off, but I couldn't tell what. The highway was straight for miles, cutting through flat land and patches of trees. I could see faint shapes along the edges of the road, fence lines, mile markers, the occasional highway sign, but nothing moved. No headlights ahead, no taillights behind. Just me and the road. After maybe half an hour of that, I noticed a set of lights way in the distance. They looked like they were far off at first, barely visible, a dull orange-white glow that blinked every few seconds. I figured it was a car a few miles ahead, maybe a semi with a flickering brake light. It didn't seem important, but I found myself watching it anyway. The light stayed exactly the same distance ahead of me for a long time. I was doing about 70 steady speed, and it never seemed to get closer or farther away. Just hovering there, always blinking, always faint. Eventually, I reached a point where the road started to curve, and for a moment, I lost sight of the light. When I came around the bend, it was gone completely. I didn't think much of it, just another driver taking an exit, I guessed. But maybe 5 minutes later, I saw another glow, this time behind me. At first, it was so far back I could barely tell what it was. Just two faint dots, too dim for headlights, but too bright to be anything else. I kept checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. The lights would fade for a bit, then come back brighter, almost like whoever was behind me kept dipping in and out of view over small hills. I didn't think about it much until I realized the lights were gaining on me. Slowly but definitely. The glow grew stronger, steadier, no flickering this time. I told myself it was nothing, just another car finally catching up on an empty stretch. But something about how slow it was closing the distance made me uneasy. I drove for another 10 miles before it finally caught up enough that I could make out the shape of the vehicle in my side mirror. It was an old SUV, maybe late 90s, the kind with square headlights and a tall frame. The lights were slightly misaligned. One pointed straight ahead, the other dipped too low. The driver stayed directly behind me, not too close, not far back. Just right in the middle, steady. Usually, on a long empty road, people pass each other fast. Nobody wants to drive side by side for miles at night. But this one didn't pass. I stayed in the right lane to give space. Still, it didn't move. After another few minutes, I noticed it matching my speed perfectly. If I slowed down, it slowed down. If I sped up a little, it followed. Every time I glanced in the mirror, those headlights were there, unmoving. I tried to ignore it, but after 10 more minutes, my hands started to sweat on the steering wheel. My shoulders were tight, my stomach twisting with that kind of nervous pressure that doesn't have logic to it. I didn't want to admit it, but I was getting scared. There were no exits, no gas stations, nothing but dark road and open fields. I thought about pulling over to let them pass, but the idea of stopping with that vehicle right behind me felt worse than keeping on. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the SUV pulled out to the left lane and started to pass. Relief hit me for a second, but when it came alongside my car, it didn't accelerate. It just drove next to me. I kept my eyes forward, trying not to look, but I could feel the presence of it right beside me. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see its dull paint reflecting my headlights. I didn't look over, but I could feel someone was in there, staring. We drove like that for maybe 20 seconds, me in the right lane, it in the left, both of us going exactly the same speed. Then it suddenly swerved slightly toward my lane, not enough to hit me, but enough to make my heart jump. I instinctively moved toward the shoulder, gripping the wheel hard. The SUV straightened out again and then, just as quick, sped forward and cut directly in front of me. The movement was sharp, reckless. I slammed on my brakes to keep from hitting it. My tires screeched, and the back end fishtailed for a second before I got control again. The SUV stayed in front of me, driving slower now. Its brake lights kept flashing, forcing me to slow even more. I could see its rear bumper was dented and rusty, and there was no license plate visible, just two screws where it should have been. I couldn't take it anymore. I changed lanes and tried to pass it, but the moment I did, it swerved again, blocking me. I went back and it followed. It was deliberate now, no mistake about it. Whoever was in there was toying with me. The stretch of highway ahead was straight and empty. I pressed down hard on the gas, feeling the engine strain as I hit 90, then 95. The SUV followed, accelerating too, its headlights bouncing in my rearview mirror as we tore down the dark road. I don't know how long that chase went on. My focus was locked on the white lines flying under me, the shaking of the steering wheel, the roar of air rushing past. At some point, I saw the faint glow of an overpass sign ahead, an exit ramp. I didn't even care where it led. I took it. The SUV shot past the exit at the last second, still going fast, disappearing over the hill ahead. I slowed down on the ramp, my body shaking, my breath coming fast. I pulled over under the overpass and just sat there with my hazard lights on, hands trembling, waiting for my heart to calm down. After maybe 5 minutes, I decided to get back on the road, but in the opposite direction. I looped under the highway and merged onto the other side, heading back the way I came. For a long time, I didn't see anything. No lights, no movement, no sign of that SUV. I drove until the first gas station appeared, a lonely building with one flickering fluorescent tube above the door. I parked and sat there, staring at my reflection in the windshield. My face looked pale and tired, my eyes wide. I stayed there for nearly half an hour before finally driving the rest of the way home. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside made me glance toward the window. Every car that passed made my stomach knot. A few days later, I checked the news. There had been a report of a hit and run not far from where I'd been that night. The vehicle matched the description of the one that followed me, an old SUV with no plates. They said the driver was suspected in multiple incidents where he'd forced cars off the highway in the middle of the night. They hadn't caught him. I don't drive that route anymore. Even when I take the highway during the day, I still catch myself checking my mirrors too often. I can't drive at night without feeling like something's just behind me, keeping its distance, matching my speed. The road feels different now. Every pair of headlights that appears behind me makes my skin crawl. I think about how quiet it was out there, how alone I was, and how easily it could have ended worse. That stretch of highway looks like any other, just asphalt and lines and emptiness. But I know better. I know how fast a normal night drive can turn into something that stays with you forever. And now, every time I see an old SUV on the road, my stomach tightens and my hands grip the wheel a little harder, because I can't help but think maybe, somewhere out there, he's still driving those same roads, waiting for another car like mine. It was around 2 a.m. when I started my drive back home from visiting my brother 2 states over. I had been awake since early morning, but I didn't feel like sleeping in some cheap roadside motel. I figured a few cups of gas station coffee and some steady music would get me through the 3-hour drive. The night air was cool, dry, and the sky had no moon. Just a long stretch of highway surrounded by open farmland and woods that looked darker than anything I'd ever seen. The only light came from my headlights cutting through the empty road ahead. The first hour was fine. The road was silent except for the constant hum of the tires and the faint vibration through the steering wheel. My high beams illuminated the white lines and the occasional reflective sign warning about deer crossings or curves ahead. I had the window cracked just a little to let the cold air hit my face. It helped keep me alert. Everything felt still, almost peaceful. But long stretches of highway have a strange effect after a while. They start to mess with your sense of distance and time. I remember glancing at the dashboard clock. It read 2:46. The next time I looked, it was 3:22, and I couldn't recall a single thing that had happened between those two times. Just darkness, asphalt, and the sound of the tires. It was like I was driving through a vacuum. Then I saw the first car. It was pulled over on the shoulder maybe half a mile ahead. One headlight out, the other flickering faintly. I slowed down a bit as I approached, expecting to see someone standing outside or maybe waving for help. But the car just sat there, motionless. The closer I got, the stranger it looked. It was an old brown sedan, covered in dust, like it hadn't been washed in years. The windows were completely dark. The driver's door was wide open, hanging slightly crooked. I drove past it slowly, keeping my eyes on the road. I didn't see anyone inside or nearby. I checked my mirrors as I passed, and the sight of that open door fading into the darkness behind me made my stomach tighten. I thought about stopping, maybe calling for help, but something about the way that car sat, perfectly still, with no hazards, no movement, no sound, didn't feel right. I told myself maybe someone had already gone to get help or gotten picked up. I tried to shake it off and kept driving. 10 minutes later, I saw movement on the side of the road. A person walking along the shoulder, head down, arms hanging at their sides. I instinctively eased off the gas. The figure was tall, wearing something light-colored that glowed faintly in my headlights. They didn't turn to look at me, didn't move their arms, didn't react at all as I passed. I only saw their outline for a few seconds, but there was something about the way they moved or didn't move that felt wrong. Too stiff, too slow. As I drove past, I realized they were walking in the same direction I was heading, away from where the broken-down car had been. I stared at my rearview mirror until they disappeared into the darkness. For the next few miles, my heart wouldn't slow down. My hands were slick on the wheel. The road felt narrower, quieter, like even the wind had died. After a while, I convinced myself it was nothing. Probably someone whose car broke down, walking to the nearest gas station. I tried to focus on the music, sipped the last of my coffee, and just kept driving. The next town was still about 40 miles out. Then, around 3:45, I saw another car ahead. At first, I thought it was just another driver, but the way the headlights hit it made my stomach sink. It looked exactly like the same old brown sedan I'd passed earlier. Same shape, same dull color, same missing headlight. It was parked on the shoulder again, facing the same direction at almost the same angle as before. The driver's door was still open. I slowed down as I passed, trying to look inside without turning my head too much. The interior looked empty again. I knew it couldn't be the same car. I hadn't turned off anywhere, hadn't looped around. It was one long stretch of road. I felt cold all of a sudden, like the air inside the car had dropped 10 degrees. My chest felt tight. I checked the clock, 3:49, and kept my foot on the gas. Another 20 minutes passed before I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. They were far back at first, tiny white dots that appeared out of nowhere. I figured it was another late-night driver. The lights stayed small for a while, steady in the mirror. Then they started getting closer, fast. I was already going 70, but the lights were closing the distance like I was crawling. Within a minute, they were right behind me, flooding my mirrors with white glare. I could barely see the road ahead. My pulse spiked as the car behind me got closer, so close I thought they were about to hit me. I moved into the right lane to let them pass, but they didn't. They stayed behind me, perfectly centered, just a few feet away. I gripped the wheel and stared ahead, trying to focus on the road. After what felt like a full minute, the car finally pulled out to the left and came up beside me. I turned my head slightly, trying to get a look. It was a brown sedan, same model, same missing headlight. My heart dropped into my stomach. I didn't look long. I just pressed down on the gas and accelerated, pushing 80, then 85. The other car matched my speed. I could feel the weight of it beside me, the hum of its tires against the asphalt. For a few seconds, we were side by side. I could see the dark outline of someone in the driver's seat, but the windows were tinted black. Then, without warning, the car swerved toward me. Not hard enough to hit, but close enough that I had to jerk my steering wheel right to avoid it. My tires hit the shoulder, and gravel sprayed under the car. I managed to stay on the road, but my chest was pounding so hard I could hear it. When I looked back, the other car had slowed down, falling behind until its single headlight became a dot again. For the next 10 minutes, it stayed there just far enough to see, following me. I kept driving as fast as I could, watching the mirror every few seconds. Then, all of a sudden, the light disappeared, just gone. I didn't slow down for a while, just kept going until I saw a green exit sign glowing faintly in the distance. I didn't even care where it led. I took the ramp too fast, the tires squealing slightly, and found myself on a smaller road surrounded by fields. A few minutes later, I spotted a gas station with its lights on and pulled in, parking right in front of the door. I shut off the engine, but my hands were still shaking. I sat there for a minute, breathing hard, staring at the reflection of the parking lot lights on the hood. The air outside was completely still. The highway hummed faintly in the distance. I looked at my phone, thinking about calling someone. But who would I even call? What would I say? That a car followed me for miles and vanished. After 10 minutes, I got out and stretched my legs. The cold air hit me hard. I looked around. The lot was empty, except for my car and an old pickup parked near the side. I went inside, bought another coffee, and stood there under the harsh fluorescent lights just to feel grounded again. When I finally got back in my car and looked at the time, it was 4:30. I still had an hour and a half left to drive. I didn't want to get back on the highway, but there wasn't another route home. So I took a deep breath, started the engine, and pulled out. The rest of the drive was quiet. I didn't see any cars behind me, no strange headlights, no brown sedans on the shoulder. But I kept glancing in the mirrors every few seconds anyway. Every pair of taillights far ahead made my stomach knot up. When I got home, I parked in my driveway and sat there for a long time. The clock on the dash read 6:01. The sky was turning gray, just starting to lighten. Everything looked so normal, the trees, the houses, the street. I got out, locked the doors, and went inside, trying to convince myself it was over. 2 days later, I saw a short news story online. It mentioned a fatal crash on that same stretch of highway around 1 a.m. An old brown sedan that had veered off the road and hit a tree. The driver was pronounced dead at the scene. They showed a photo of the wreck, one headlight missing. The timestamp on the article was nearly an hour before I ever left my brother's house. I don't know how to explain what I saw. I don't believe in anything supernatural, but I know I was wide awake, and that car was real enough to nearly push me off the road. I still drive that route sometimes, but never at night. I can't. Because every time I see an old brown sedan now, every time a single headlight appears in my mirror, I feel my chest tighten all over again. The road looks the same as it always did, but it feels different now. Like there's something out there waiting, quiet and patient, sitting on the shoulder with its door slightly open. It was close to midnight when I started my drive home from visiting my cousin. I had stayed longer than I meant to, and by the time I got on the highway, the world already felt half asleep. The air was still and cold, the sky thick with low clouds that seemed to swallow any trace of stars. The road stretched ahead of me like a dark river, empty except for the white dashes glowing in my headlights. I had about 100 miles to go, and all I wanted was to get home, shower, and crawl into bed. The first hour was peaceful. The hum of the tires against the asphalt and the steady drone of the engine felt almost hypnotic. I didn't pass a single car for miles. The highway signs came and went, green and reflective, counting down the distance between me and the next nameless exit. Every so often, I'd catch the flicker of red eyes on the roadside. Raccoons or deer, probably, but nothing unusual. Just that deep, empty quiet that makes the world feel bigger than it should. Then I noticed something strange. Up ahead, about a half mile in front of me, there was a pair of taillights. At first, I was almost relieved to see them. Another human being out there, proof that I wasn't the only one cutting through this stretch of dark highway. The car was going a little slower than me, so I expected to pass it in a few minutes. But as I got closer, I noticed how oddly those taillights moved. They weren't steady. They drifted side to side, weaving slightly across the lane. First, I thought the driver might be drunk or tired. I slowed down a bit, not wanting to get too close. The red lights bobbed faintly, flickering as the car swerved again, one tire briefly touching the shoulder before sliding back to center. My gut tensed up. I'd seen wrecks before. Metal twisted and glass scattered like confetti, and I didn't want to be part of another one. After about 2 minutes of following at a distance, the car suddenly slowed down. Its brake lights glowed bright red for a second, and then it drifted toward the shoulder and stopped completely. I slowed too, unsure what to do. Maybe they'd pulled over to rest. Maybe something was wrong with the car. I kept moving slowly, planning to drive past. But as my headlights illuminated the vehicle, something didn't sit right with me. It was an old sedan, silver or gray, covered in a thin film of dirt like it hadn't been washed in months. The driver's window was rolled halfway down, but I couldn't see anyone inside. The interior was completely dark. The driver's door looked slightly ajar, just barely. I could see a faint glint of light on the door handle. I drove past without stopping. My first thought was that whoever was driving had gotten tired and decided to sleep. My second thought was that maybe they'd broken down and left to find help. I tried not to overthink it. People pull over for all kinds of reasons. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about that car was wrong. I drove another 15 minutes, keeping my eyes on the road and forcing my thoughts elsewhere. The stretch of highway between small towns always has that same lonely feel. No streetlights, no houses, just endless blacktop. Then, far in the distance, I saw another pair of taillights. They were faint at first, but the longer I stared, the more my chest tightened. It looked like the same car. The taillights had that same uneven flicker, like one bulb was dimmer than the other. I tried telling myself it was just another old sedan. Highways are full of them, but when I got closer, my stomach turned. The car was swerving again, just slightly, in the same slow, drowsy motion. I slowed down immediately. There was no exit, no gas station nearby, just miles of open road. I thought about stopping to call highway patrol, but my phone barely had a signal, and part of me didn't want to pull over either. The memory of that first car, sitting empty on the shoulder, flashed through my head. I didn't want to be that close to it again. After a few minutes, the car ahead started to drift onto the shoulder again, just like before. It slowed, braked gently, and rolled to a stop. I felt my pulse thumping in my neck. I looked at the clock on the dashboard, 12:48 a.m. I hadn't taken any exits since the last time I saw it. It didn't make sense. I drove past again, this time keeping my eyes locked straight ahead, but my peripheral vision caught enough. Same color, same dirt-caked body, same half-open driver's window. And again, the door was slightly open, like someone had gotten out, or was about to. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles hurt. I didn't know what to think. My brain kept trying to find logical explanations. Maybe there were two similar cars, maybe I was just tired, maybe it was some weird coincidence, but deep down I didn't buy any of it. The third time I saw it was worse. Almost 40 minutes later, after miles of trying to convince myself I was imagining things, I saw faint red lights far up the road again. I knew instantly what it was. My stomach dropped as I realized I was catching up to the same car again. This time it wasn't moving at all. It was already stopped on the shoulder when I first saw it. I eased off the gas. My headlights began to reach it, slowly lighting the back of the car, and that's when I saw something that froze me. The driver's door was wide open now. There was no one inside. The car looked abandoned, and this time I saw the front, crumpled like it had hit something hard. The hood was dented, the windshield cracked in a spiderweb pattern. A faint shape lay in the grass beside it. I couldn't make out what it was, and I didn't want to. I pressed the accelerator and didn't look again. I drove faster than I should have after that, pushing the car close to 90. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those headlights behind me again. But there was nothing, just blackness. For the next 20 miles, I didn't see another car, didn't even see an exit sign. I started counting down the green mile markers just to have something to focus on. When I finally saw the glow of a gas station ahead, I pulled in so fast I barely braked in time. It was one of those 24-hour truck stops, half lit, half dead, with a single cashier inside staring blankly at a screen. I parked near the pumps, left the engine running, and just sat there, my chest rising and falling fast. The whole highway felt like it was still inside me. The black road, the red taillights, the open door. After about 5 minutes, I turned off the car, went inside, bought a bottle of water, and stood under the harsh fluorescent lights until my heartbeat slowed. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just needed to feel normal again. When I finally got back in the car and started the last stretch home, I noticed something in my side mirror, a faint reflection of red light far behind me. It was so distant it could have been anything. Maybe a truck, maybe another car just joining the highway. I tried not to care. The rest of the drive was quiet. I reached home around 2:30 a.m. The moment I stepped inside, the silence of my house felt different. Heavy, still. I stood by the window for a while, looking out at the empty street, half expecting to see a pair of taillights passing by. The next morning, I couldn't shake it. I went online and searched for any reports of accidents or abandoned vehicles along that route. After a few pages, I found one, a small local news article timestamped just after midnight. A single car crash had been reported that night about an hour before I passed through. The driver, a man in his 40s, was pronounced dead at the scene. He had apparently lost control, hit the guardrail, and died on impact. The car had been cleared from the shoulder by 11:30 p.m., but I was on that road after midnight. I saw that same car 3 separate times. I drove past it twice while it was still there. I don't know how or why, but I know what I saw. Now, every time I drive alone at night, I catch myself watching the shoulders too carefully, my eyes scanning for flashes of red in the dark. Every reflection in my mirrors makes me tense up. I tell myself it's just headlights, just traffic, just coincidence. But deep down, there's a moment every night, right when the road is at its quietest, when my headlights stretch out farther than they should, where I half expect to see that silver car sitting there again, door open, waiting. And that's why I don't drive after midnight anymore. I was driving home late from a job site one Friday night, somewhere along Interstate 70 in Utah. It was one of those long, empty stretches where the road goes straight for miles, with nothing on either side but desert and distant cliffs. I had left way later than planned. The sun had already set behind the mountains, and by the time I got on the highway, it was pitch dark. My truck's headlights were the only light around. I hadn't seen another vehicle in a long time. It must have been close to midnight when I started feeling that quiet kind of tension that comes from being out there completely alone. The road felt endless. The lane reflectors glowed white, stretching ahead like a tunnel. The desert on both sides looked flat and dead, the kind of place that felt like it could swallow a person and no one would ever know. The air inside the truck was dry and stale from the heater. I had a half-empty energy drink in the cup holder, and I was just focusing on staying awake, keeping my hands steady on the wheel. Every few minutes, a gust of wind would push against the truck, reminding me how empty it was out there. After a while, I noticed something strange in the distance. A faint blinking red light far ahead, low to the ground. I figured it might be a hazard light, maybe a car broken down on the shoulder. I hadn't seen another car for over an hour, so the thought of someone else being out there actually made me feel a bit of relief. But as I got closer, I realized there was no car. The red light was just a single blinking beacon, like one of those emergency lights people put out on the road. When my headlights finally reached it, I saw a small gray sedan parked halfway off the shoulder, angled slightly toward the guardrail. The red blinking light was sitting on the asphalt about 10 feet behind it. The car's hazard lights weren't on, and there was no movement inside. I slowed down not to stop, but just to look. The driver's side door was open. The interior light was on, but the seat was empty. The trunk was shut, no sign of damage or a flat tire. It didn't look like an accident, just like someone had pulled over and left in a hurry. As I passed, my headlights swept across the other side of the highway, and that's when I saw him. A man standing by the guardrail facing the desert. He wasn't moving. He just stood there, completely still, a few feet from the edge. His back was to the road, and he was dressed in dark clothes, jeans, a jacket, maybe a hat. I could see him clearly for only a second or two as I drove by, but he didn't even turn his head. He looked like he was just staring out into the darkness. The sight of him jolted me awake completely. I felt a cold chill crawl up my back, that instinctive feeling when something doesn't make sense. There was no town nearby, no houses, no lights, nothing but open land. What the hell was he doing out there? I drove for a few more seconds, my mind racing. Maybe he was a hitchhiker. Maybe the car broke down and he was looking for cell service. But something about the way he stood there didn't fit. He wasn't waving for help, wasn't moving at all. I thought about turning around, but that part of the highway had no exits or crossovers for miles. And honestly, the longer I thought about it, the less I wanted to go back. It didn't feel right. Something about that scene had a weight to it, like I had just seen something I wasn't supposed to. I kept driving, trying to shake it off. The red blinking light faded in the distance behind me, swallowed by the dark. For a while, the road ahead looked exactly the same. Flat, empty, cold. I tried focusing on the yellow line in the center, but I couldn't stop thinking about the open door, the empty seat, and that man standing by the guardrail not even looking at the road. After maybe 15 minutes, I came up on another rest area sign, one of those small ones with just a bathroom and a few picnic tables. I thought about stopping to use the bathroom and calm my nerves, but something in me told me not to. The whole highway felt strange, like I had crossed into some forgotten stretch of it where people didn't come anymore. A few miles later, I saw headlights approaching from behind. The first car I'd seen in what felt like forever. I kept watching it in the mirror, glad someone else was finally out there too. But as it got closer, I noticed it was a gray sedan. My stomach dropped. It looked exactly like the one I had just passed. The same shape, the same faint reflection of light off the hood. I tried telling myself there were plenty of gray sedans out there, that it couldn't be the same one. But the closer it got, the more uneasy I felt. It stayed behind me, keeping the same distance, not gaining, not falling back. I checked my speed, 65 miles per hour exactly. The car matched it perfectly. After a while, I started feeling that kind of nervous energy that builds in your chest. I sped up to 70. The car sped up too. I slowed down. It slowed down. That was enough for me. I took the next exit that showed up, a small one that led to some county road, thinking I could pull off, turn around, maybe lose them. The off-ramp curved right and dipped behind a small hill. When I checked the mirror halfway down, the car was gone. I stayed on that side road for a few minutes, heart pounding, waiting to see if it would follow. Nothing, just dark silence again. Eventually, I got back on the highway and kept going east. When I finally reached a gas station near Salina, I pulled in and sat there in the lit parking lot for a long time. There was a trucker inside paying for fuel, a couple vending machines humming by the wall, and the sound of the fluorescent lights buzzing above me. It was the first time all night I felt like I was back in the real world. I filled the tank, stretched my legs, and decided to check the news on my phone. I still had no signal, but when I got to the next town a few hours later, I searched online out of curiosity. I found a small article posted that same morning. Body found along I-70 east of Green River. It mentioned a gray sedan, abandoned on the shoulder, door open, and a man found dead about 20 yards away from the guardrail. They suspected he had gotten out to look for help and possibly fallen down a steep embankment during the night. No foul play suspected. It didn't say what time it happened, just that a truck driver had reported seeing the car around midnight but didn't stop. That was me. For a long time after that, I kept thinking about whether he was alive when I drove by. Maybe he was still standing there, dazed or injured, and I just left him. But the thing that haunts me most isn't that. It's the car that followed me later. I never saw it leave the shoulder. I never saw it pull onto the highway. But I'm certain it was the same one. The same shape, the same headlights, the same eerie way it stayed right behind me without ever closing the distance. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it. But other times, when I'm driving late at night through those empty stretches, I'll glance in the rearview mirror and swear I can see a pair of distant headlights, faint and steady, always keeping the same space, never passing, never falling back. And every time I see that, I remember the man by the guardrail. The way he stood there without moving, facing the darkness, as if something had already pulled him out of this world long before he fell. Now, I don't drive those highways at night anymore. Not because I'm afraid of ghosts, but because out there, you realize how thin the line is between life and being lost forever. And sometimes, it isn't ghosts you need to fear. It's the things that don't make sense but still happen, right in front of your eyes. I was driving alone across Nevada, heading east on Highway 50, the one they call the loneliest road in America. It was late, close to midnight, and I had already been on the road for nearly 8 hours straight. I'd been trying to make it to Ely before sleeping, but the distance between gas stations, the dark, empty stretches, and the way the desert seemed to swallow the light from my headlights had started to wear on me. The further I drove, the more I realized how truly alone I was out there. There were no towns for miles, no cell signal, and the last car I'd seen had been nearly an hour ago. The road was 2 narrow lanes cutting through endless desert, the sky above a black ocean of stars. Every few miles, a reflective sign would flash past. Next service is 47 miles or watch for wildlife, but nothing else. The radio had gone to static a long time ago, so all I could hear was the low hum of my tires and the occasional gust of desert wind pushing against the car. My dashboard clock glowed 12:11 a.m. My eyes were starting to blur, and I could feel the dull ache behind them that comes from staring too long at the road's white lines. I decided I needed to stop soon. I remembered there being a small rest stop somewhere up ahead, a picnic area, maybe a bathroom. I didn't care if it was just a dirt pull-off. I just needed to stretch my legs, close my eyes for a few minutes, and get out of that endless tunnel of blackness. About 20 minutes later, I spotted it. A faded green sign appeared on the right. Rest area 1 mile. I felt a wave of relief. The headlights hit the reflective letters, and it was the first thing in hours that felt like civilization. I slowed down slightly, scanning the shoulder for the entrance. When I saw the turnoff, I eased off the highway and rolled into the rest area's small gravel lot. It was empty, not a single car, truck, or RV. Just one cracked asphalt circle surrounded by scrub brush and a few dead trees. There was a single picnic table near the center, a dim light flickering above a concrete bathroom building, and one tall lamppost that buzzed with an uneven yellow glow. The rest of the area was drowned in black desert. I parked near the light, shut off the engine, and just sat there for a moment. The silence hit me hard. Without the hum of the car, it was absolute. No insects, no wind, nothing. I got out and stretched. The night air was cold and dry, the kind that stings a little in your nose. I walked a few steps, listening to the crunch of gravel under my boots. Felt like I had stepped out into another world. After a few minutes of stretching, I decided to use the restroom before getting back on the road. The bathroom building looked rough. Faded paint, a few holes in the siding, and the door to the men's side hanging crooked on its hinges. The dim bulb above the door flickered weakly. I hesitated but figured it was better than nothing. Inside, it smelled of dust and old water. The air was cool and still. My footsteps echoed off the concrete floor. There were 2 stalls, 1 urinal, and a cracked sink with a mirror so cloudy I could barely see my reflection. The light buzzed overhead, and somewhere in the far corner, I heard a faint dripping sound. When I was about to leave, I froze. There was a noise from outside. A short, heavy sound, like a car door slamming shut. I stood completely still, listening. Nothing, just the hum of the light. I told myself maybe it was just the wind pushing something loose, but there hadn't been any wind a minute ago. I waited another few seconds, then slowly pushed open the bathroom door. The gravel lot was exactly the same, empty, quiet, still. My car sat under the lamppost where I left it, headlights off, doors closed. I stepped out, scanning the shadows around the edges of the light. Everything outside the circle of yellow glow was pitch black, the kind of black that feels solid, like it could swallow you if you stepped too far into it. I started walking back toward the car, telling myself I was just tired, my mind playing tricks from being on the road too long. But as I got closer, I noticed something strange. My driver's side door was cracked open, not fully, just barely unlatched. I was sure I had closed it. I always did. I stopped, staring at it. The wind had picked up a little, moving the door slightly back and forth. I looked around again, still nothing. No lights on the highway, no sounds. I approached slowly, every step crunching in the gravel. When I reached the door, I leaned down and looked inside. Everything looked normal. My backpack was still on the passenger seat, my jacket on the backrest. But then I saw it. The glove box was open. I hadn't opened that. I felt a wave of cold crawl up my spine. I reached inside and shut it, my hand shaking a little. Then I checked the back seat. Nothing there. I looked in the mirror to the back of the lot. Still empty. I locked the doors, started the engine, and told myself I was leaving. As I backed out, my headlights swept across the far edge of the rest area, where the light from the lamppost barely reached. For a split second, I saw something move, a shape low to the ground, slipping behind the bathroom building. It moved fast, too fast to get a good look. I froze again, my hand gripping the shifter. I didn't want to stop, but curiosity fought against my fear. Could have been an animal, maybe a stray dog or coyote. I sat there, headlights pointed at the building, engine running, waiting to see if it moved again. Nothing. I sat like that for almost a minute. Then, without warning, the flickering light above the bathroom went out. The whole building was swallowed in black. That was it. I shifted into drive and pulled out fast, the gravel kicking up behind me. I didn't look back at the rest stop. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my neck. I merged back onto the highway, headlights cutting through the dark again. The desert stretched endlessly ahead of me. For the next few miles, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see headlights behind me or something in the back seat. Nothing. Just the beam of my own lights on the road and the dark emptiness around me. After about 15 minutes, I started to calm down. My mind began trying to rationalize it. Maybe another traveler had stopped for a minute. Maybe the wind caught my door. Maybe I had left the glove box open earlier without realizing. I wanted to believe that. I needed to. But then, around 20 minutes later, I saw something on the side of the road. At first, it looked like a shadow, just a lump off the shoulder. But as I got closer, I realized what it was. A car, parked on the gravel, no lights on. The exact same make and color as mine. My stomach turned when I saw the driver's door open, swinging slowly in the wind. I slowed down a little, my mind racing. There were no lights, no one standing near it, no sign of another car on the road. I didn't stop, couldn't. I just kept driving. I checked the clock, 12:56 a.m. The highway was still empty in both directions. The last gas station sign I'd passed said, Eerie, 67 miles. I didn't see another vehicle until well past 2 a.m. By the time I pulled into a small motel on the edge of Eerie, my hands were still shaking. The lot was half full of trucks, the lights bright, the sound of an air conditioner humming from the office window. It was the first place that felt real again. I checked in, went to my room, and locked the door twice. I couldn't stop thinking about that rest stop. The open door, the glove box, the movement behind the bathroom, and that car that looked just like mine sitting abandoned on the shoulder miles later. The next morning, when I went out to my car in the daylight, I noticed something I hadn't before. On the inside of my driver's door, right near the handle, was a faint smudge, a dirty fingerprint. It wasn't mine. I wiped it off, started the car, and kept driving east. I never used another rest stop after dark again. Even now, years later, I still think about that night whenever I drive long stretches of empty highway. The quiet, the darkness, the sense that someone else was out there too. Just out of sight, just waiting for someone tired enough to stop.